Hey there everyone, welcome to Tales in Text and I'm your host Nisha and welcome to another Mahabharata episode. And Mahabharata lovers, you are in for a treat today because finally I have completed the Harivamsha. Hey! So in the Mahabharata, we meet Shri Krishna as an adult. We see him interacting with the Pandavas and the Kauravas as an adult. Krishna's involvement and role in the Mahabharata itself is that of a friend, a confidant, a guide, a strategician, a charioteer, a philosopher, and just overall the person who gives support to the Pandavas and tries to give some advice to the Kauravas, which falls on deaf ears for a lot of people. But those who do agree with him don't have the freedom to act upon his words. We see Krishna's involvement end, or at least in some ways temporarily end, after Yudhishthira is coronated as king, after Bhishma's Nirvanam, and Krishna instates Yudhishthira and he goes back to Dwarka. After that, we only hear of Krishna years later when we find out that he is dead. Daruka, his charioteer, comes rushing to Hastinapura sobbing, begging the Pandavas for help as all the men in Dwarka have killed themselves or killed each other, and Balarama and Krishna are dead, and someone needs to go back to Dwarka to save the women, children, and the senior citizens. And Arjuna goes and he actually sees Krishna's body, and because there are no sons left to light the funeral pyre, Arjuna does it himself, and then he tries to bring Krishna's wives, daughters, younger children within the kingdom, the other women in the kingdom and the other aged people. But on the way back, he is attacked by bandits, and for some reason his powers don't work, Gandiva doesn't work, and he comes back empty-handed after all the people who had accompanied him are either killed or abducted. During this entire course of the Mahabharata, we don't really know much about Krishna's background. We must assume that the Pandavas know something about Krishna's background because they are related to each other through Kunti. But as a reader, unless you have read Krishna's life story separately, you will not know about Krishna in the Mahabharata, specifically in terms of how he was born. Why was he born? Why is he considered an avatar of Vishnu? Why was there a necessity for Krishna to come down so early when the Kurukshetra war did not happen? Was the Mahabharata or the Kurukshetra war the primary reason he came down, or was that a secondary reason? Was there something else? How did Krishna grow up? What are his childhood exploits, the mischievous things that he did, and how did he help people, right? In his teenage years, what happened? And even post Yudhishthira's coronation, what exactly happened during that time in Dwarka? So we don't really know what happens in Vrindavan, in Mathura, in Dwarka. We don't really know anything about Krishna except for his friendship and his love for the Pandavas in the Mahabharata. And that is exactly the vacuum that the Harivamsha tries to fill. So the Harivamsha is actually divided into 3 parts. And the first part is the Harivamsha Parva, the second part is the Vishnu Parva, and the third part is the Bhavishya Parva. So I've made a lot of notes in the back as usual. And I will go through as many of them as I can, so you can get a sense of what this book is actually like. So the Harivamsha Parva, which is the first Parva of the Harivamsha book in itself, actually includes a genealogy of Hari's lineage. We start right with the creation of the universe, and we look at how Vishnu came into being, the relationship between Vishnu and Brahma, and then we go into, over the years, the different divine and mortal descendants who come through Vishnu, either through divine means or through physical reproduction means, and then we finally come to Yayati's lineage or Yayati's lifetime. Now, as you know, Yayati had 5 sons. one of whom was Puru, and it is Puru's lineage that was continued through the Kauravas and the Pandavas. But Yayati also had another son named Yadu, and it is through Yadu that the Yadavas, Krishna's clan, Krishna's community, continued. So Krishna is a Yadava, and that's how they're also related to the Pandavas. If you look at even back in ancestry, apart from the fact that Kunti is Vasudeva's sister, and therefore Krishna and the Pandavas are cousins. So the genealogy of Hari brings us to the point of Krishna's birth, and then we move into a section that is more philosophical, that talks of the greatness of Vishnu, the greatness of Krishna. And the Harivamsha Parva is very religious and bhakti oriented. In fact, the whole of the Harivamsha, if I were to compare the Harivamsha to the rest of the 10 volumes of the Mahabharata, the Harivamsha definitely is steeped very much in the bhakti rasa, in the devotional element. Every single thing that is written is steeped in the devotional element, devotion towards Krishna, with Krishna being posited as God. Whereas you don't see the Krishna in the Mahabharata being posited as God, with the exception of a few places, for example, the Bhagavad Gita, and when he shows his cosmic form to Arjuna not once but twice. And even if we look at saving Parikshit, yeah, I think that even there we look at Krishna as a god. But beyond those two instances, you don't really see Krishna being shown as a deity or shown as an avatar of Vishnu. Rather, we see him more as a man who is just really good at what he does. Whereas with the Harivamsha, the entire book is steeped in that bhakti rasa. The strongest element of bhakti you see in the Harivamsha Parva of this book, because it's all about the glorification of Krishna and of Vishnu and of the genealogy of Hari. Then we move into the Vishnu Parva. And interestingly, the Vishnu Parva doesn't contain anything about Vishnu himself. It is all about Krishna's life from the time of his birth till the time he kills Kamsa. That I would say is the majority chunk of the Vishnu Parva. But we also extend a tiny bit into looking at Krishna getting his wives, right? How did he marry all of his wives? Krishna giving birth to his sons, right? Who were his sons? What were their strengths? What were they achieving? How were they similar or different to from Krishna? So we look at all of that. Interestingly, one of the major observations that I had with the Vishnu Parva is that one of the, I think, the most shocking things that I found out here, it is shocking for me, I mean, I don't know if it's for you, is that Kamsa, I mean, the way I have heard this story growing up is that Kamsa is supposed to be Krishna's uncle, right? He is Devaki's brother. But according to the Harivamsha, Kamsa is Krishna's cousin. Devaki is Kamsa's aunt, Ugrasena's sister. Ugrasena is Kamsa's father, and Devaki is Ugrasena's sister, one of the younger sisters. And that's why the age gap and the age differentiation is sort of like not very clear. But Kamsa and Krishna are cousins, which came as a very huge surprise and shock to me, because growing up I was always told that Kamsa is Krishna's uncle and not his cousin. So I don't know, let me know in the comments, I mean, how many of you have heard that he was his uncle? How many of you have heard that they were cousins? I'd really like to know because this is something that was actually quite like very new to me, right? During Krishna's birth, right, when Krishna is born, one of the most popular episodes or events that happens is when Vasudeva is taking, baby Krishna out of the prison, and he wants to save Krishna. He parts the ocean, he asks Varuna to make space and move, and the ocean actually stops flowing and then sort of separates, and Vasudeva with baby Krishna on his head, they walk forward towards the other bank. So that is a very strong imagery that is always there in popular renditions of Krishna Avatara or anything to do with Krishna, right? But the Harivamsha does not include that in its content. Such a thing never actually happens. Vasudeva gives baby Krishna to Nanda Gopala, who is actually a neighbor of Kamsa. So he really doesn't go anywhere except just go literally to the next house to hand over the baby, and then he comes back to the prison. So that was again another very interesting perspective that I had never known. So that was quite interesting to find out. We then move into, there's a lot that happens in terms of sort of establishing the children growing up, that is Krishna and Balarama's antics as little babies. And then we move into all of the experiences that young Krishna, right from babyhood to teenage years, experiences with all the various asuras and the daityas and danavas. We see Krishna meeting all of our usual suspects. He meets Kalia the snake, he meets Putana, who is, interestingly, Putana is shown in popular editions as a woman who comes to breastfeed baby Krishna by poisoning her breast so that the baby dies. But in this edition, that is in this Harivamsha, Putana is actually a bird, and how Krishna kills her is basically he bites the bird so hard that he draws a lot of blood, and out of blood loss the bird dies. So Kalia is still a snake, Putana is not a woman, she's a bird. Then he defeats and kills Pralamba, who is a daitya who comes in the form of a human and tries to kidnap and kill Balarama. And then Krishna encourages Balarama to kill him because he doesn't want to overstep. He recognizes that, you know what, this is my brother's fight. But I think I should remind him that he too is divine, right? Because Balarama is the avatar of Shesha. Then Krishna fights and kills with Arishta in the form of a bull, right? Arishta is the bull, the Danava who comes as a form of bull. Then Keshi comes in the form of a horse, right? So all of these, Kalia, Putana, Pralamba, Arishta and Keshi, they're all the Daityas, Danavas and Asuras who attack Krishna and Balarama when they are young, and they are duly killed. During this time, we also have the incident of the Govardhana mountain, which, and this is definitely there, this is definitely according to the more conventional belief systems of Krishna's stories. Indra's, the reason Indra gets angry is because usually at a particular point in the year, people would conduct a sacrifice in his honor. But Krishna says, you know, why are we worshipping Indra when we have to worship the forests and the earth for giving us all of the bounty that we have? Why are you worshipping the rains when you can worship the earth? And Indra gets really angry and he just stops raining. Then he realizes that people are not getting impacted due to the drought. So he starts pouring completely, and the entire area is completely inundated in water. And at that point, when people start drowning and dying and their crops are completely getting killed, animals are getting washed away, then Krishna goes to Govardhana mountain and he picks it up on one hand and he asks all of the others to come and create a settlement of their village underneath the mountain. And seeing this, Indra realizes his folly and he realizes that this is Vishnu come down as human. And in many Puranas, Indra and Vishnu are brothers. So he realizes this is my brother and I can't believe I did this to him. And he apologizes and Krishna forgives him and they both sort of part ways amicably. And then Krishna, of course, puts the Govardhana mountain down. So this particular episode is still retained in this version of the Harivamsha and is still according to the divine structure that we actually see in all Krishna retellings. Once all of this is done, you know, Krishna grows up and he has to go to Mathura, to Kamsa's palace. There, while on the way to meet Kamsa, he meets Kubja, and as you know, he helps Kubja basically get her deformity fixed. That is, I don't mean to offend anyone, but Kubja has a lot of physical issues like a big hump and a lot of other physical issues since birth, and Krishna heals her with his magical powers and she becomes a really beautiful woman and she expresses her desire to marry him. In some versions, the regional versions, we do find out that Krishna does accept and marry Kubja, but in this version of the Harivamsha, I didn't find anything like that where he marries Kubja. She just expresses her desire to unite with him, but beyond that there's nothing else. In Kamsa's palace, Kamsa is really angry and frustrated that Krishna and Balarama have the temerity to come into the palace and into the city to meet him, and he very well knows that he's about to be either dethroned or worse, killed. So he has a lot of his his personal army and his personal wrestlers, his mahouts, and everyone attack Krishna. We have first Mahamatra, who is the mahout of all the elephants. Mahamatra gets on a particularly aggressive elephant and tries to stamp Krishna to death, but Krishna saves himself and the others by killing both the elephant and the mahout. Then Kamsa unleashes all of his powerful wrestlers, who are Chanura, Tosaka, Mushtika, and a bunch of other wrestlers who go and attack Krishna, and then they are also killed in that match. Then at that point, when there is essentially sort of like, imagine like a gladiatorial arena. So Kamsa has sort of invited the whole city to come and watch Krishna's death in public, but Krishna kills all of the animals, all of the wrestlers, and all the other people who are dispatched to kill him. And once all of these people are dead, Krishna jumps onto the dais where Kamsa is sitting, and then he grabs hold of Kamsa's hair. And then he yanks him down from the dais, from the pedestal, onto the ground, and he keeps pulling his body and smashing his body on the ground, and then he starts strangulating Kamsa. And then that's how he kills Kamsa. So interestingly, Kamsa's death is not according to conventional standards of how a Kshatriya should die. There is no war, there are no weapons or arrows or like swords or gadas used to kill him. Krishna basically, I don't know if you've read the Iliad, when Achilles is torturing Hector just before his death. Of course, he's tied Hector's body to the chariot, and then he rides it around, basically pulling the body behind him. Krishna doesn't ride on the chariot. Krishna just physically drags the body around and then throws it around and then breaks all of the bones, and then ultimately ends up strangling Kamsa. So even in death, Kamsa's death is very, I would say, humiliating for what a Kshatriya would consider to be a good death or a respectable death, because he doesn't die defending his kingdom. He is killed while watching a match, and he doesn't even do anything to stop it. He realizes that I think my actions have sort of caught up to me and I can't do anything about it. So he gives up his life. Right after this, Kamsa's brother Sunama comes and Balarama ends up killing him. After all this happens, Jarasandha, who has given two of his daughters to Kamsa as his wives, he realizes now that his daughters are widowed. He is really angry because not only are his daughters widowed, but Kamsa was a very good friend of Jarasandha. So he attacks Krishna and Balarama. But Jarasandha will have got a boon to not be defeated at that particular point in time. So no matter what Krishna does, he's unable to defeat and kill Jarasandha. But he does find out through his divine powers, a voice tells him from the heavens that Jarasandha is destined to die, but just not right now and not by your hands. And in case you're wondering, in the Mahabharata, we do see Bhima killing Jarasandha himself. So it is during, I would say, when they want to basically get all the people who were sort of under the subjugation of Jarasandha to be, to be freed and to get that fealty from people. That's when Bhima kills Jarasandha. So Krishna doesn't kill Jarasandha, he lets him go because he realizes that, okay, he's not meant to die by my hands, so I'm going to let him go for now. So after all of this happens, the people in Mathura, they decide to give Krishna the kingship. They say, why don't you take on the leadership here? Why don't you become our king and take up Kamsa's role? So Krishna says, I've never been interested in being a king. The only reason I wanted to kill him is because he has been committing so many atrocities against so many people that I had to fight for dharma. And of course, I'm happy with the fame that I have received, but I don't want kingship, I don't want riches. And he gives his grandfather Ugrasena the opportunity to, or rather I would say, his grandfather Ugrasena, the opportunity to become king, and Ugrasena accepts. After this, we see an older Krishna going out, we have the episode of meeting Rukmini, and Rukmini is supposed to be married to Shishupala, but then Rukmini is not interested in getting married to Shishupala, who is the king of Chedi, and she mentally chooses Krishna. So Krishna abducts her, and there's a big fight between Krishna and Rukmini's twin brother. But because Rukmini begs Krishna to not harm her brother, he lets him go. But the enmity between Shishupala and Krishna sort of get further solidified because Shishupala is unable to get over and overcome the, I would say, the humiliation of losing at Krishna's hands. Alright? Then we find out a little bit about so right after Kamsa dies, we have this part where all his wives are crying piteously, and they are just really heartbroken, and they're just confused and terrified about what's going to happen to them, especially if Krishna comes into power. So Krishna actually feels bad, and then he makes a speech, where he basically says that I wanted to kill Kamsa, but in my childishness I forgot that there were so many people depending on Kamsa, like his now widows and his very young children, and I didn't realize that I was going to create a jeopardy for their lives and for their safety. How could I have been so foolish? How could I have been so heartless? I could have just imprisoned him and let him live. At least these women would not have come to this situation. And so he starts berating himself, and to me that speaks a lot about his compassion. And yes, because Krishna is still a teenager, no matter what we say about Krishna as a god, at that point in his reality he is still a teenager. So he did an act which, yes, was good in terms of the greater good, but which did affect and hurt a lot of other people who had nothing to do with hurting others or committing the adharma that Kamsa did. And so Krishna realizes that he should have been more cognizant about the greater impacts and consequences of his actions. And I think to a large extent, this is one of those pivotal moments that sort of make him more, I would say, more aware of the long-reaching and the long-standing consequences of his actions. So that's very interesting. During that time itself, we also see Ugrasena's wife, Ugrasena's wife, who is Kamsa's mother, crying, like tremendously, just sobbing at her heart out because of Kamsa's death. And at that point, it is revealed to us that Kamsa is not actually Ugrasena's biological son. Ugrasena's wife would have been raped by a king called King of Sauba, whose name is Drumila. And Drumila would have raped Ugrasena's wife, and she would have become pregnant with a child. And at that time, because she's so appalled and horrified and heartbroken at what has happened to her, she curses the child, saying that the child that is in my womb will be the definition of adharma. Since you have perpetrated a sin on me, all the evils upon in this world will be vested in this baby, and he will be killed by another who will be born in my lineage, who is pure. And that is the story behind Kamsa's birth, as to why he is born as such an evil king and why Krishna was meant to kill him. But interestingly, at Kamsa's death, we see one of the people who is the most affected and most afflicted by grief is his mother. And at the end of the day, this is again one of those very heartbreaking moments in this book, where you realize that when Ugrasena's wife cursed the baby, she was doing it at a time when she was so emotionally vulnerable. She had just been assaulted, and she didn't know what to do, and she took out all of this pent-up rage and frustration because she wouldn't be getting any justice, right? There's no such thing as justice at that time in terms of when women were violated. It happens across the epics. They really don't get any justice. They're just expected to put up with it. So she curses the baby, who, if we're being fair, was innocent. The baby was not it was not responsible for the hurt that she had to experience, but the baby ended up getting cursed. And I think over a course of time, she grew to love this child, because at the end of the day, it is her son. And at some stage, she must have felt bad for cursing him, now especially when her words have come true. Interestingly, this point of mothers making statements and then out of what they believe is a sense of dharma, and then when those actions come to pass, and then they are heartbroken because they blame themselves for being instruments for making this happen. It's not just with Kamsa and his mother, but even with Gandhari. When Gandhari is about to, when Duryodhana goes to ask her for her blessings before the war, she says, let the side of Dharma win. Knowing fully well that her sons are not on the side of Dharma, and her words are basically a seal on his death warrant. But when he dies, when they all die, her anger is so much that she burns Yudhishthira's fingers when he tries to touch her feet to beg her for her forgiveness. And she curses Krishna also that just as how my sons died, your people will also kill themselves and die at a time when you think you have achieved peace, and your whole city will get destroyed. And that also happens, right? So it's very heartbreaking to see that these mothers are forced to confront these situations, and then they're forced to blame themselves for things that are out of their control. Because in the grand scheme of things, if we look at it, none of these are these women's fault. They are just, again, pawns of fate, pawns of time, just like everybody else's, Krishna himself included, right? So that was a very interesting section that I read. Then we look at the move from Mathura to Dwarka. And the reason they move from Mathura to Dwarka is essentially because Mathura is being attacked by Jarasandha's army. Jarasandha is relentless. He's been let go by Krishna now, and he is aware that Krishna cannot kill him, although he doesn't know why Krishna cannot kill him. So he continuously, relentlessly starts attacking Mathura. Then there is the attack by Kalayavana, who is another king, and Kalayavana also starts attacking Mathura and trying to sort of kill Krishna. And then there is the attack by the bandits, who are anyways living in the forest around Mathura. In this instance, we see that, Krishna makes the decision. Although Ugrasena is the king right now, Krishna is always consulted in terms of what is the next steps for their entire community. And then he decides, how about we move to a different place in a completely different part of the country. It may take us a while to go there, it may take us a while to get set up, but ultimately I think this is going to be good for us. And that's when they go to the seashore to Dwaravati, also called as Dwaraka today. And there Krishna calls upon Vishwakarma and all of the primordial elements, the various gods, and then he asks them, can you build me a palace and can you build me a city here that is something so magnificent that even Indra does not possess such wealth. No gods possess cities and palaces that are so beautiful, that are so filled with magic. I want the best for my people and for my own family, so I want you to construct this for us. And Vishwakarma, who is the architect of the gods, does oblige and does do this. And for quite some time, things are okay. Krishna gets married to other people. He has a lot of sons. And then we hear all about the different tales, Pradyumna, Samba. We hear about Pradyumna's marriage. We hear about Aniruddha's birth. So we hear a lot of these different stories of Krishna as an adult. And to be very honest, I don't know the timeline in terms of whether these things happen before he meets the Pandavas, or is it after he meets the Pandavas when he's not with them. For example, during those 14 years exile, he doesn't really go to meet them often. There is a very large stretch of time that he doesn't actually physically meet them, and he only comes to them proper just before the war starts. So is it during that time? I don't know that actual timeline. I'm assuming it is sometime before the war, because we see a lot of his clansmen and his kinsmen participating in the war itself. So I have to assume that this is just the pre-war time period, right? And then we hear about the Narakasura tale. So Naraka is a demon king who has abducted thousands of women. The exact count is 142,000 women, and he is basically terrorizing people. And people around Naraka's dominion come and beg Krishna, you have to help us please, because he's making our life miserable and he's kidnapping all of our daughters. And so Krishna goes with Balarama, Satyaki and everybody else to Narakasura, and there he fights and he kills Narakasura's main commanders, who are Hayagriva, Virupaksha, Panchajana, Mura and Nishunda, and finally he ends up killing Naraka and freeing the women. Another reason for Naraka's death is given as how Naraka steals Aditi, the god, the mother of all the gods, Aditi's earrings, and Indra comes and begs him, saying that you have to help because she's your mother too. That is as Vishnu. So that is another divine reason for Krishna's intervention, apart from the people begging him to help them. So you will also recognize these names of like Hayagriva, Virupaksha and Panchaja and all of these names that are often ascribed to Krishna and Vishnu, but it is because he has killed all of these demons in his Krishna avatara that he's called by these names. And then he frees the 1,42,000 women, all of whom say that they would like to be married to him. Although I believe this marriage is more of a symbolic, emotional and spiritual giving of these women to Krishna rather than an actual physical act of marriage, because there is no evidence in this book that shows that they physically marry him or share his bed or anything like that. It is more of a we give ourselves to you spiritually because you have saved us, and we will dedicate our minds and hearts to you while living our lives in prayer. It's more of a spiritual sort of a bhakti sort of a marriage, I would say. Then then we have the killing of other Daityas and Danavas like Talaketu, Gopati, Nimi, Hamsa, all of whom come at different points in time. Then there's a very interesting point where we look at Pradyumna's story, but we find out that Pradyumna, when he was a baby, would have been kidnapped by a Daitya, right? Daitya or a Danava. And he and for the longest time Krishna and Rukmini don't know where Pradyumna is, and Pradyumna will be raised by this adoptive parents, the Daitya, and his wife's name is sorry, I've written it down here. His wife's name is Mayavati. Yeah. But when Pradyumna grows up, he becomes this really handsome man who can charm a lot of women, and Mayavati falls in love with him. And Pradyumna realizes that there's something wrong, and he calls her out saying that what is wrong with you? You, instead of having maternal feelings for me, you are having some dirty feelings for me. And I don't even look like you and my supposed father. Who am I and who are you? And that's when Mayavati reveals the truth, saying that she and her husband are not his real parents, that they stole him from Krishna and Rukmini. And therefore, because she is not his real mother, she is allowed to be with him. Okay. And according to this book, Pradyumna ends up killing that man, the Danava, who ended up kidnapping him as a baby. And he ends up marrying Mayavati and taking her to Krishna and Rukmini's palace to show that, hey, I'm your son and this is my wife. I really don't know what to say. Look, in my books, adoptive parents are real parents, and it does not matter whether you share someone's blood. If you have that parent-child relationship, that relationship is sacred. It does not give people leeway to have incestuous relationships, which are just creepy and just weird and crosses all bounds of dharma. I mean, I don't want to be a judgmental person, but I think there are certain things that are universally a no-no, and an adoptive son marrying his adoptive mother because they are not related and they ended up falling in love is just very weird to me. I don't know. Anyways, after this extremely shocking revelation, Pradyumna is accepted into the family, and he also marries other people, and then finally he has Aniruddha. And then one of the final things that we see in the Vishnu Parva section of Harivamsha is how Aniruddha is the story of Aniruddha and Usha. So as you know, Usha is the son of Bana, and Bana is the son of King Mahabali, who from the Vamana Avatara story, right? So Bana has got a beautiful daughter named Usha, and in her dream, Usha imagines that she's making love to someone, and her friend draws a lot of images, and then Usha recognizes Aniruddha's image and says, "This is the man who in my dreams. I've fallen in love with him. I want to be with him now." And so her friend uses Maya to kidnap Aniruddha and bring him to Bana's kingdom, and where Aniruddha and Usha fall in love, and then they make love, and then they stay there for a long time. Unfortunately, Aniruddha is found out, and Bana has a whole fight with him. And after some time, after about 8 days of fighting, I believe it's 8 days, I can't remember the number correctly right now, Aniruddha is finally captured and taken into the dungeons. In the meantime, Pradyumna and Krishna are worried where Aniruddha is and why he is nowhere to be found. But finally, they send spies around the country, and they find out that he's held as a prisoner in Bana's kingdom. And that's when Krishna, Pradyumna, Balarama, Satyaki, and all the others go to rescue Aniruddha. And a long battle ensues. And for those of you who knows Bana's tales, you'll know that God Shiva is very much in favor of Bana, because Bana is one of his greatest devotees. So God Shiva and Kartikeya are both actively protecting his kingdom and protecting him. So in the end, what happens is, because Bana has God Shiva's patronage, Krishna is not able to kill him. So Bana says, this is going nowhere. How about we part ways amicably? Let me live, and I will let you live, and you can have my daughter as well. And God Shiva grants him a lot of different boons, and Bana goes his way, and he becomes an immortal. And Krishna is also happy with this, because he doesn't want to pick up a fight with anyone at this point. And he takes his grandson and his new granddaughter-in-law back to Dwarka, and things sort of get back normal, right? So we end Vishnu Parva with Bana's tale, and with Krishna coming back to Dwarka with his family, and it is assumed that they live happily for the foreseeable future, right? At this stage, we don't really know, once again, whether this is pre-Kurukshetra war or post-Kurukshetra war when all of this happens. But so the assumption is that Krishna's life takes, I would say, a much smoother turn in this case. Interestingly, he doesn't seem to interact with the Pandavas in the Harivamsha. There is only one section, and I would believe the last 2 pages of the Vishnu Parva, where Arjuna is narrating a tale about Krishna's generosity and compassion. But beyond that, there is no active interaction between the Pandavas and Krishna in the context of the Harivamsha itself, right? So after the Vishnu Parva ends, we move to the section 3 of the Harivamsha, which is the Bhavishya Parva. So the Bhavishya Parva, very interestingly, takes us back to Janmejaya's snake sacrifice. And we see that Janmejaya wants to actually conduct a horse sacrifice to claim his control over the world. But Vyasa materializes there immediately, extremely worried, and then he begs Janmejaya to not conduct the horse sacrifice, and tells him that this desire and greed for power, that is power and control over land, over money, is what ruined your forefathers, is what ruined your grandfathers, and killed your entire dynasty. Don't go and do this horse sacrifice again, because the kind of power that is up for grabs, it is very corruptible, and you will be destroying the Kuru lineage and whatever your grandfathers fought for by needlessly going and doing this horse sacrifice. So Janamejaya initially says yes, but then after Vyasa goes, and after the snake sacrifice is over, a few years pass, and Janamejaya still again holds the horse sacrifice. Unfortunately for him, God Indra is very pissed off, because he doesn't want anybody to gain control over the earth. And so he obstructs the horse sacrifice and makes sure that the horse sacrifice is not completed correctly. And when that happens, Janamejaya just loses it. He's extremely angry, and he believes that the Brahmanas deliberately messed up the yajna, because they were thinking of what Vyasa had said during the snake sacrifice. And so he thinks that they have transgressed their oath to the king, and he banishes all the Brahmanas from the kingdom along with their families. And because his wife Vapusthama, who is the princess of Kashi, was also participating in the yajna, he feels that she must have done something wrong, because he believes in a very sexist way that as a woman, of course, she must be responsible for the bad results of this yajna, which is a very sexist and gendered thing to say, when it was not at all her fault and not the priest's fault at all. It was Indra's fault. And then he tells her, I don't want you ever, and I want you to get out of the kingdom. right? So he banishes both his wife and all the priests and all the brahmanas from his kingdom. And at that point, Vishwavasu, who is the king of the Gandharvas, who is also there sitting in his court, comes and tells Janamejaya, hey, calm down. This is not any of their fault. This is Indra's fault. Indra did this to you, and that is the reason you are not able to complete this horse sacrifice. But why are you doing this anyway? Don't you remember what Vyasa had told you? Why do you want to make the same mistakes that your forefathers did? Just enjoy what they've given you and continue being a good king. So finally, after much convincing, Janamejaya sees sense, and he agrees, and then he says, okay, you know what, I am not going to be conducting any of these rituals anymore. I will just let things be and we can go on. Then we have the final version of the Bhavishya Parva, where we actually see the Bhavishya about what happens to Janamejaya's lineage and by extension the Pandavas' lineage. So Janamejaya is believed to have, I'm reading it from the book directly, is believed to have two children, two sons. One was Chandrapida and the other was Suryapida, right? Chandrapida had 100 sons. And the eldest of Chandrapida's sons was Satyakarna. So Chandrapida is the older son who ends up getting the throne after Janamejaya. Out of Chandrapida's 100 sons, his eldest son Satyakarna gets the throne. Satyakarna's eldest son Shwetakarna gets the throne. Right? So you have about 3 generations after Janamejaya. Janamejaya, Chandrapida, Satyakarna, Shwetakarna. Right? Now Shwetakarna ends up having a son through the daughter of Sucharu, who is a Yadava lady, right? Who belongs to Krishna's lineage. Her name is Malini. So Shwetakarna and Malini have a son. But Shwetakarna, the moment his wife gets pregnant, that is, she is a few months into the pregnancy, he decides to go on the Mahaprasthanika journey. The Mahaprasthanika journey, if you remember, is that same journey that the Pandavas and Draupadi undertook at the end of their lives, when they basically give up everything, all the material things, and they climb up the Himalaya mountains in order to reach the gates of heaven, in order to get moksha, right? And it is one of the hardest journeys to make in the world, and it essentially means that you're giving up everything and you don't seek any help after this point. So without caring about his wife Malini's pregnancy, Shwetakarna goes off to the Mahaprasthanika final journey. But Malini, out of devotion towards her husband, decides that she will not leave him to go alone and she will not stay back. And unmindful of the kingdom, she too follows Shwetakarna without his knowledge. She goes behind him. And there, while she is on the mountain, because you will remember if you watched my volume 10 review, where Yudhishthira will have said that once you are on the mountain, you can't turn back for anything. So even if Shwetakarna would have realized that his wife is following him, dharma and the rules of the whole Mahaprasthanika journey would not have allowed him to turn around and beg her to even go back. So even if he heard her struggling and trying to come up, he was helpless to help her. Of course, that doesn't excuse the fact that he created this whole mess by abandoning his pregnant wife, when he could have just stayed put and just waited until her son was born, so that at least the Kuru kingdom could have a ruler, right? And then he could have gone. But he behaved selfishly because he was chasing moksha. So that sense of that greed that is there in the Kuru lineage in itself, even if this man is a Pandava by definition, that greed and selfishness is still seen in this one more. Either ways, whoever we cast the blame on or don't cast the blame on, ultimately it's a tragic set of circumstances. Because what happens next is Malini, she is unable to bear the stress of the journey, and she ends up giving birth to a baby right on the mountain. A mountain which is supposedly not accessible by anyone who is not on the Mahaprasthanika journey. So she ends up giving birth to the baby there, and she ends up dying. After she's dead, the baby is just lying there in the snow and just crying out because of the cold. And when all seems to be lost, 2 Brahmana men find the baby there, and they take the baby with them. Now, it is not explained why the Brahmana men are there or why they took the baby and then they got off the mountain. It brings into question whether people can actually get off the mountain, but then there is this legend around it. That's why people are scared to get off the mountain. What is the situation? We honestly don't know, because the Harivamsha, the Bhavishya Parva doesn't really tell us, doesn't really answer these loopholes for us, because they are loopholes. So how does the Mahaprasthanika actually work? Or are you supposed, or are you not allowed to get on from the mountain only after you have mentally accepted that I am going to go on this journey? But someone who says, no, I don't want to go on this journey, but I want to just come there for, I don't know, for a gym or for meditation, they can get back down. I don't know, honestly. There is no information in the book either. So anyways, they take this, these two brahmanas, are their names are Pipalada, and they take this baby to the place where they are basically staying and they are working. So the Pipaladas are believed to be this person Shravishta's sons. We are not told who this person is or why they are there. So the Pipaladas take the baby to their employer, whose name is Vemaka, and there they raise this baby. And then one day, as the baby will be playing, he'll be playing with a bunch of goats, and then he'll have gotten hurt by the goats, and therefore his skin will have become a darker coloration as it will be healing. And because of this, he's given the name of Ajaparshva. And Ajaparshva is the name of Shvetakarna's son. But these Brahmanas and Vemaka don't know that he is the prince of the Kuru lineage, or that he is the heir to the throne of the Kurus. He's the heir to the throne of Hastinapura. They just think he's an abandoned baby, that he's an orphan child. And Vemaka, because he wants someone to continue his lineage, he essentially has Ajaparshva marry someone, and Ajaparshva does, and then he has children, but all of them sort of become like these low-level dependents, and they sort of they disappear into the folds of the public, never to be heard from again. So ultimately, the Kuru kingdom, for all intents and purposes at least, in terms of who should rightfully rule the kingdom, is left without an heir. We don't know what happens to Hastinapura after that. Do one of Shvetakarna's brothers or nephews take over? Does Hastinapura fall from its power, from its grace, and does the whole kingdom crumble? Does Indraprastha crumble? Right? We don't know. We don't know what happens, right? So we really don't know. All in all, we end the Bhavishya Parva of the Harivamsha feeling a little sort of dissatisfied and heartbroken, I would say. For me, at least, it was. Because, we've seen this whole course of the war, right from, I would say, Shantanu's time period all the way till now, when this child, the one who was supposed to be the ruler, didn't even know that he belongs to the Kuru lineage. And that's the saddest part, right? They fought. Yes, we can talk a lot about dharma, adharma, and everything in the context of the Mahabharata. But the reality is that this fight was between two sets of brothers from the same family over land and money. That's it. At its core, that is what it was. It was a fight for land. And after having gotten this land, one might say, hey, the Pandavas, at least they died feeling that we've done our duty, so who cares, right? At least their life purpose was completed. But ultimately their goal was to make sure that Pandu's lineage continues through time. But yes, it continued in one way, in terms of biologically, but they lost the kingdom, right? Because we don't know whether Shvetakarna had any more sons apart from this. Because according to the book, he didn't have any other sons. This was the only son that he had. According to the Harivamsha, this child is the only son that he had. And that is the Ajaparshva, he's the only son. So he really didn't have any brothers, in which case, who would have taken over? There was nobody from Dhritarashtra and Gandhari's side who would have taken over. There was nobody there except for Yuyutsu, but Yuyutsu is also not entitled to take on the throne because he's not a Kshatriya. He's not a royal born technically. So perhaps other kings took over, Indraprastha and Hastinapura both. Perhaps someone faked a claim, who knows, or the kingdoms just fell into oblivion, got lost in the sands of time, who knows. And for me personally, that feels like such a sad ending, because now the victory of the Pandavas seems so hollow. It hardly lasted more than 4 generations after their death, and everything was gone. But I think that is the greatest learning from the entire Mahabharata and from the Harivamsha, is that everything is transient, nothing is permanent. Time is fleeting, just like that life is fleeting. And the best we can do is try to live this life with kindness, compassion, courage, dignity, and dharma. If you stuck around so far, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Tales in Text. Bye bye.